What's up, y'all? Aronius here, back with another Raid Shadow Legends video. Hope you're having a great day or a great evening wherever you are in the world. Sending some positive vibes your way. Let's get into this video. I'm going to talk about the new changes to Diamant, Coppercoin, as well as Androck. Probably two champions that I'll never get in a very, very long time, but you never know. So let's hop right into this. All right, so here we have it. Two more rebalances to champions that you probably will never own. Anyways, let's see what we've got going on. If you do have Diamant, Coppercoin, or Androck, where do you currently use them in the game? I'd be really interested to know because I don't have either of them on any of my accounts. So Diamant Coppercoin is inherently somewhat selfish and greedy. Our goal was to boost this champion's value for the team. It's for the collective benefit of every Ogren, not just you, Diamant. So obviously they want to give him more value for places like hard mode faction wars as well as Curse City. It's going to be a pain in the neck now to be facing Diamant Coppercoin in Curse City and other PvE areas of the game. You know how that works. Whenever they give a buff to a champion and you're facing them in PvE, they become ridiculously not overpowered, but extremely powerful and annoying to go against. You can now be confident that bringing him in will benefit all team members. He now provides a more consistent turn meter boost to your team, ensuring good value when all buffs are removed. Speaking of buffs, his passive will now convert debuffs into buffs for an ally. That's actually really strong. This is certainly enough to declare I'm a team player now, don't you agree? I would say so. So going against a Coppercoin in Curse City is now going to be such a pain in the neck, you're probably going to want to rip your hair out. Especially for the new hard mode faction wars. Androck, on the other hand, with his rebalance, they aim to restore his Lion's prowess, especially for his second form, while simultaneously enhancing his utility within your team compositions. Increased damage output, there you go, that's fantastic. We anticipate his strong performance as a secondary damage dealer in various PvE locations in his second form, particularly against bosses. Okay. Concurrently, his first form will serve as an even more resilient team defender in Arena. So this guy is possibly going to come into Arena a lot more often. You don't really see him at all. He does have the increased resistance on the team. I'm pretty sure he has that. But he also has, I believe, the Enfeeble for the enemy team, which is pretty strong. So let's read on. His revamped passives now boost the stats of all allies, while his 8-3 in the second form deals max HP damage based on the bosses. Wow, okay, damage to boss max HP now is not bad. So he's going to come into Chimera, the likes of Chimera. He's going to come into Hydra a lot more. I think he's going to be really, really solid PvE champion now. This allows for flexible investment in his damaging stats and ignore defense sets, positioning him as a secondary damage dealer or solidifying him as a steady defensive tank with protection set pieces. I love how they actually included protection sets and having a little bit more knowledge about the champions that they're bringing out into the game. That's good. They actually understand how you'd want to use this guy, especially when he's placing a lot of buffs on the team. His passives will ensure your team benefits from additional resistance and accuracy depending on his current form. So that sounds good so far, but let's actually see what they've got going on. We're going to start off with Diamant Coppercoin here. So before, attacks all enemies, increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn, fills this champ's turn meter by 10%, and fills their turn meter by an additional 5% for each buff that had its duration increased by the skill. So that's not bad. Now, attacks all enemies, increases the duration of ally buffs is the same, fills the turn meter of all allies by 20%. So he just straight up flat fills the allies' turn meter by 20% instead of it being based on buffs that had their duration increased by the skill. So that is strong. It's still on a 5-turn cooldown, so you do have to keep that in mind. Now on the Kingpin passive, 50% chance to convert a debuff, this is before, into a buff before it's placed on this champion, works with the following debuffs. Converts a 25% and 50% decrease attack debuffs into 50% increase attack. Oh, okay, so both of them go into the strong one no matter what. Okay, so he basically just converts the debuffs into buffs. That's kind of cool. It doesn't work for every single debuff. So now it just works on everybody on the team. So it just changes to on an ally. So it has a 50% chance to convert a debuff into a buff before it is placed on an ally, which means everybody on the team. So, which includes himself. So that's really nice. I think that's a good change. I mean, he is a void legendary, so come on. Like that's needed. You really need that, especially if you're going to play him, for example, in arena. But the only downside of this is he's not removing stuns or any crowd control effects. So that's the only downside. So decreased attack, decreased defense. The only person that's really putting the decreased defense right now would be Odin. So he'll convert the decreased defense on your team to increased defense because of Odin, but he won't remove the stun. The decreased crit rate, decreased crit damage is not used very often in arena, but there are some champions starting to come out that place the decreased crit damage and decreased crit rate. So I think it's Naomi, if I'm not mistaken, for an example champion. And Naomi is, let me just take a look here. I believe she is Sylvan Watchers. Yeah, decreased crit rate right here on the A1 for Naomi. So she's being used a lot more. She's kind of meta in my opinion right now in live arena, especially arena, where she places the block damage on all allies for one turn at the start of the round. Each time this champ's HP drops below 50% also places it. I think this is kind of busted for a mechanic, especially when you can just put protection set on her. Like, she's probably one of the most broken champions right now in my opinion, but that's just me. You put her in that, and then the other team has to wait a full turn, especially if they're speed teams, right? So speed teams, this is their worst nightmare right here, especially if you pick the wrong champions to go up against her. So HP burn's not going to do anything to block damage. The only person that's going to go through that is like Gizmac, something like that. But then again, probably going to have Stone Skin on your team anyways. So anywho's, enough of that person. I wish he had a little bit more in terms of removing CC, hard CC from the allies, but he's still a decent champion. If we go take a look at him here, he has other skills that could probably assist with that. Like, let's see, not this one. Places a 3 intercept stacks on a target ally. It's not on all allies, but he does do increased resistance and strengthen on all allies for 2 turns. I mean, the thing is, he has to be extremely fast. He has speed in all battles by 20%, but I don't think that in this current meta in arena, he would be a big pick right now. Maybe for early, mid, and some late game, but for end game arena, I don't think he comes in all that often. I really don't. Because these debuffs, although it's going to be great for PvE, for PvP, it's going to be challenging. Yeah, you can still use this guy. I'm not saying you can't use him in Gold 5, regular classic arena, but in live arena, in the end game live arena, you're probably not bringing him in all that often. So could he work? Yes, but he would be placed in a really high resistance team, maybe with Androck. If you have both of them together, maybe you try to make it work. But is it worth all the resources and gear that takes forever to get on your account when you can place it on other meta champions that would do more work for you? That's just my opinion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on that. All right, so let's go on to Androck here. Oops. All right, didn't mean to close out of that. So here we are. We've got Androck here now. So before Androck on the A1, the Pride's Bite. This is on his base form, by the way. Places an increased defense on all allies for 1 turn. That's it, and attacks 1 enemy. So the only change is that he has a damage multiplier increase, which is not bad, of course. And then on the A2, this only change, he has the increased res, strengthen, and continuous heal on all allies for 2 turns. That is a very strong ability. And then places an additional continuous heal on all allies with less than 50% HP for 2 turns. And the change to this is that he now brings in turn meter to the team. Also fills the turn meters of all allies by 15%. So you could potentially build a resistance arena team with Diamond and with Androck and be an extremely annoying player, but doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have crazy damage output with this team, because you still need to bring in a really good speed lead. And with a high resistance team, you have to be able to go first, because you need to place the increased resistance on your team. So between him and Diamant, you're going to keep on placing increased resistance on your team the entire time, the entire fight. So the downside is there's increased accuracy. There are people that ignore the resistance thresholds. So especially mythicals, they ignore resistance thresholds. So it's like basically increased resistance teams, or resistance teams in general, don't work very often as they used to, but they can still work. They're just very niche. So the passive increases its champion's resistance by 10 for each buff on each ally. Critical hits inflicted by allies fills the turn meters of all allies by 5%. It occurs once per skill. Now the change is increases each ally's resistance by 10 for each buff on all allies. Wow. Okay, so they're really trying to focus on making resistance teams. It seems like it. It seems like they're trying. They're trying to get us to be able to make a resistancy. I've been asking for this for ages, because all you ever see is high accuracy CC crowd control teams removing all buffs from enemies, and accuracy is way stronger than resistance in this game. And I like that they're trying to bring in a little bit of resistance now. You know, now it's starting to come into play. And if I did get Androck, I actually wouldn't mind getting him now, just to test him out and try him out and see how he does. Is he going to be the best mythical? No, he's not going to be the best mythical, but he is a stronger mythical than what he was, because he wasn't really doing much damage output at all, but now they're going to give him some more damage. Now the only downside is on his base form, he only has this ability that attacks one enemy for damage. So hopefully it smacks and just knocks somebody out. But you never know. It's just a one hit. It's not going to be insane. If they have a UDK, it's going to go right into UDK. So keep that in mind. Now, he is positive affinity against UDK. So could he knock out UDK with one hit on the A1 if he doesn't have stone skin on him? Maybe. So this is nice. 10 for each buff on all allies, which means if you have, let's say, 4 buffs in arena, in like a perfect world, you'd probably have between 4 and 5 buffs if you have a Sifi. So you want to bring in a Sifi with this team, because she has the increased resistance, I believe, in her kit, and that's going to help with the resistance team in general. And then Sifi's going to speed everybody up, place 3 buffs on all allies, times that by 4, you got 12 buffs. You're looking at 120 resistance on everybody already. And then Androck brings buffs, and then Diamant Copper Coin brings buffs, and then other champions will bring buffs as well. So it could actually potentially be very niche meta, but not very strong, but it's still going to be niche. I think it could work in certain situations. So other than that, it does note if there are multiple champions on the team with the same skill, only one will activate. That makes sense. And then if you go on to his base or secondary form, let's see. So before, the Glide Thorn or Guild Thorn Assault attacks one enemy, 50% chance of placing a decreased defense debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. Wow, that's actually really strong in PvE. Now the multiplier is increased. So same skill, just increased multiplier for damage. Then on the A2, Palisade Breaker attacks all enemies, places a decreased resistance, big version, a weaken, big version, and an enfeeble. Of course, enfeeble doesn't work on bosses, but it can work on the enemy team. So this is actually really strong. If the enemies have 50% HP or less, the enfeeble cannot be removed. Also very strong. Attacks all enemies now. Same effects here, but they added also decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 15%, which is pretty good. That's pretty good for PvP now. I think that's nice. Androck might actually come in a lot more often now, especially with the damage multiplier increase as well. So he's going to do a bunch of damage to the enemy, as well as decreasing their turn meter, placing the increase resist and decrease resist and weaken on the enemy. So not bad at all. I think that's pretty decent of a change. It's actually a decent change. The Roar of Catharis removes all buffs from all enemies, deals pure damage to each enemy equal to 5% of the target's max HP for each buff removed. This damage cannot be critical, and I think that was a big problem, that it couldn't be critical, and so it doesn't really hit as hard as you would have thought it would. Also places block buffs, debuff on all enemies without buffs for 2 turns. Okay. Now they change it to removes all buffs from all enemies. That's still the same. Then attacks all enemies if the target is a boss. So they change this into a attack still, which is fine. If the target's a boss, the damage inflicted is equal to 10% of their max HP. So automatically it's equal to 10% of their max HP. So that's not bad. That is not bad at all. Also places block buffs on all enemies without buffs for 2 turns. And the damage multiplier was just changed. It wasn't increased, it was just changed. So going up against a boss, this is going to be an extremely good ability. Of course, against regular enemies on PvP in Arena, it's not going to be super strong. But for Hydra and for Chimera, that's going to be crazy. And for this one here, Lionheart passive increases the champ's accuracy by 10 for each buff on each enemy. Each critical hit inflicted on allies decreases the turn meters of enemies by 5%. Each critical hit inflicted by allies decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 5%. That's actually pretty crazy. So there's a lot of turn meter manipulation, and there's no cooldown on his passive. So, but the issue is you'd have to be going first, or you'd have to be trying to take as many turns as possible. Maybe like counterattack sets are really good with this guy and with your allies, because this passive works for himself as well every time he attacks and inflicts damage or a critical hit. So he would have to have 100. This guy's gonna be hard to build, actually. He's gonna be hard to build because you would want damage, you'd want resistance, you would want accuracy. Maybe you can forego resistance because he's going to be your damage dealer, but he would be hard to build as a full resist champion because it's just the thresholds are so high. But they also changed this to increases each ally's accuracy instead of himself. So every ally gets accuracy increased by 10 for each buff on all enemies. Again, super strong. Very strong passive. Each critical hit inflicted by allies decreases the turn meters of all enemies. That stays the same. If there are multiple champions on the team with a skill, only one will activate. Makes sense. And then his base speed got increased to 115 from 110. Very, very strong. I think that this guy might actually be pretty damn strong, mainly for PvE, but for PvP, he's going to be super niche. People will bring him in, but I don't think he's going to be absurd for PvP just because he has a lot of A1 hits, or rather single target hits, as compared to AoE hits. I think they only changed one ability to do an AoE hit. Well, 2 abilities he has AoE. So this one here does not attack. Base form does not attack all enemies. So you have to swap over to the secondary form. And the only thing that's possibly going to kill the enemy is the Palisade Breaker, but he's also susceptible to sheep, so keep that in mind. Yeah, I feel like he's gonna be a sheep magnet. I feel like he's gonna have a lot of troubles in PvP still, unless you have high resistance. But then again, does resistance actually, I don't think that resistance can deflect the blessings for sheep. It can only deflect a person trying to play sheep, like an Armand or something like that. So yeah, it's still not going to be the best in PvP, but PvE, he's going to be god tier, I think. PvP, he's still, I mean, unless his multipliers are disgusting, and then you don't go for accuracy on this guy, but that's kind of what you need in his kit, especially for PvE. So let me know what your thoughts in the comments are down below. I'm kind of half and half on the Androck rebalance as well as Copper Coin rebalance. I'm a little bit more leaning towards it being a good rebalance, but it's not meta in my opinion. It's just going to be strong, and in niche situations, you'll use them in PvP. So anyways, that's gonna be it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on a video soon. Take care.